Welcome to the council meeting of the Wednesday 28th of July 2021. I'd just like to welcome you all back. I presume you've all had a wee break, which I think we all needed, enjoyed, and really enjoyed, I think. The ones that did go away, Councillor McMillan held the fort while I was away, which was great. Thank you, Liz. Welcome to staff, the media, and all of you at home who are listening in. I'll call for apologies. Councillor Falloon?
Yes.
So mover that we received that apology. Councillor Rawlinson, Councillor Graham, all in favour please say aye. Carried, thank you. Extraordinary business, I know of none. Declarations of interest. I know of none. We have Dan from the Methven Community Board, Chair of Methven Community Board, with us today, and I'd like to give him speaking rights on two matters today. One is in committee and one is in open around Methven Water. So I'd like to move that Dan gets speaking rights, and Councillor McMillan seconded. All those in favour please say aye. Gets carried. There's no discussion on that, was there? No. Thank you. Minutes of the council meeting on page 4. Any alterations or additions? Angus? Oh, no. Alterations or additions on page 4. Page 5. Page 5. Angus?
I bring this up, Mr. Mayor. Oh, good afternoon, councillors and Mr. Mayor. I bring this up because quite rightly I've been called out by the watchful eye of the Methven Community Board for voting against how it reads here as their strategic plan. I realise some people think I'm it, but I actually think I'm Angus Mackay. So it was suggested the cost of the review should be met by council. Yes, I said that, and that's why I voted against the motion, not that a plan be for council.
So the minutes are accurate or not?
Well, the reason why I voted against the motion was because it was suggested, I did suggest that, yes, that it be funded by council. And quite rightly, the community board has called me out on their watchful eye because they believe I voted against the plan being done. I actually voted against the plan being done because it was not going to be funded by council.
Okay, so that's clarification. Thank you. Right. Page 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13.
Yep.
Stuart.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got an inquiry regarding, on page 13, the motion that was passed regarding the Ashburton Museum and Art Gallery. It only tells half the story. There was an amendment proposed, and it was only, the amendment was lost on the all casting vote, whereas you read it here, it looks as if we're 100% in favour, which doesn't give a true indication of what actually happened at that meeting. It looks like there was no actual disagreement, and I think that was incorrect.
You're correct. There was an amendment of that original motion.
It's actually, Mr. Mayor, it's actually in our minutes.
Public excluded. Minutes.
But this is transferred, but it's only transferred half the story.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the minutes are correct, but there's some part of the minutes which is still in public excluded, which you think should be an open meeting.
Yes.
So can we discuss that when we get to those minutes in public excluded and make a decision there whether they stay or not? But the actual minutes themselves are actually correct.
But I'm not going to vote in favour of these minutes because they only tell half the story. How can we pass some minutes and then change them at a later date?
Mr. Mayor, I think the way we've understood what we should be doing is that when council considers a matter that's been in public excluded and then looks to consider whether that decision should be brought out, of course the decision is only the final resolution. So that's why it's sitting in there, and the balance of the debate remains public excluded. If we wish to if we wish to consider whether or not more should have been brought into the public domain, then we can only do that in public excluded because that still sits in there. I guess to the point that we don't think the minutes are correct, if that was council's view, then we could, Mr. Mayor, potentially not adopt these minutes as correct now and just leave it lying on the table. When we get to public excluded, we can consider whether or not more should have been brought out. If the will of council is that more should have been brought out, we could then do so, add those to the minutes, and then consider the minutes at the end of the meeting, in public meeting, and then the minutes could be still resolved correctly at this meeting.
The only comment I'd make, when we decided to transfer the decision from in committee to open meeting, the decision was the matter of what we actually decided. Well, to me, when the whole matter is the whole matter, you can't just pick one part of the motion and forget the other part. It's either all in or all out. Either we made a decision including the discussion, or we didn't. What's the sense of putting the final motion if you don't see what actually happened? I think as open meeting now, the public should understand what actually happened.
Yeah, and I'm welcome to have that debate as to what should be and what shouldn't be out. So if you'd like to move that we let this matter lay on the table, we'll get to those minutes later in public excluded and revisit this and see which way we take them from there.
I'll second that.
Second, moved and seconded, matter lays on the table. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. It was Stuart. Next item is Audit and Risk Committee minutes. So I'd like to move any alterations or additions. Are we just receiving those minutes? I think we're just receiving them because they'll be confirmed at the next Audit and Risk. Yeah. So Stuart,
I'll
move that we receive. And Carolyn?
Yeah.
All in favour, please say aye. Carried. And over the page to the Town Centre Subcommittee, we'll receive those minutes. Someone like to move? Carolyn? Councillor Lovett? All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Well, I've gone past the airport, have I? Found.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the wrong way around. I was on the wrong page. Item number 6, the Airport Authority Subcommittee minutes.
I'll move them. Yeah.
Lane,
Did you receive them? Yeah.
Yeah.
received them, and Lynette.
Yeah.
All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Number 8, backflow prevention policy. And Mel and Andrew, thank you. Anything further you'd like to add to your report?
Nothing further to add. Thank
I think councillors have had a copy of the actual changes in the report. Let me just find it here. Any questions, councillors?
Yes.
Angus?
Apart from the 3 X's were adopted, what are the changes?
Oh. Mel?
They were as emailed through, but there's very minor amendments. The main thing is the appendix at the end has been changed.
There's a flow chart in there too as well. Yep.
That's appendix 1.
The appendix in the policy,
It's appendix
which
1.
is sorry, page 27 on Stella.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Angus?
what are the changes there?
Very, very
Page
minor.
27 on Stella. I've been told they're minor, but what are they? Because the Stella I've got has no changes on it.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, look, maybe I can help. The only changes that I'm aware of that I was involved with were relating to references to legislation, some of which is still changing, and we got rid of some older references to regulations. And as Mel said, I suppose the biggest change was the inclusion of the pictorial appendix, which actually gives some examples of the equipment as opposed to trying to describe them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Have all residential properties got a non-testable valve at the moment?
No, not residential properties. Typically what we have is a stopcock or in our new manifold units that we've adopted. These have a non-return function, but you can't test them. They work one way, we just replace them if there's a concern.
So, supplementary, majority of houses haven't got a non-returnable valve then?
No, I'd say the majority have, but it's just a simple valve. The purpose of this policy is to identify properties where there's a higher risk and we require a different level of service.
Councillor Wilson?
And that sort of answers my question. Is it, I've read that policy about 3 times and still couldn't convince myself that it's compulsory to put one of these units on a house now. Now you're going to make it compulsory on all new builds going forward.
Well, what the policy is effectively doing is giving us the tools to require it. So under the drinking water standards and the rules we're operating under now, we have an obligation to manage backflow. Most councils like us, until now, have been relying on the backflow provisions of the Building Act, but the legislation is a lot stronger than that in reality. So a business might be able to meet their requirements in regards to backflow under the Building Act, but then still require a greater level of service from us at the boundary in order for us to meet our obligations.
Thank you.
Just have a question. Of the backflow preventers that get tested every year, if you've got a business, I think they've got to be tested every year. How many fail?
I'm actually sorry, I wouldn't have that information. I'd have to get that from our building guys.
And if there's not many that fail, is testing every year too frequent?
You might have to take that up with a higher authority than me.
Is that a regulation?
That's a regulation level.
Regulation, okay.
Yeah.
And do you know what the cost of testing these valves are every year on a business?
No, I don't. We have our own on some of our facilities. It's in the order of a few $100s, depending on the accessibility of the site and what they have to do. But I'm aware that some properties actually have sufficient expertise to do it in-house. Certainly some of the specialist businesses.
It's not a service that council offers.
No.
Could it be?
Well, we could look at it. The ruling or the regulations talk about an independently qualified professional. The issue for us under this policy is, would we be considered independent? Maybe. We may not be.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
I'll move when you're ready.
Lane, you've got a question? We've got one question from Lane. If you go all fingers.
Yeah.
Lane.
Yeah, as I understand, listening here, so not all connections having a backflow prevention on it. Is that correct?
No, I'd be pretty confident to know there'll be some level of protection on every connection, but there'll be instances where the level of protection is not sufficient for the risk that the property poses.
But just the normal houses, they all got a simple.
But they've got at
connection
least a modicum of backflow prevention by default.
So basically, council is safe. We don't get the water back.
Yeah,
From the normal.
yeah, that's the intention.
I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay. Oh, no, Councillor Lovett, your
I
question.
just had a question. So in the future, like all houses are not going to have them, but it's the backyard businesses I'm concerned about change of people's environment. You know, there's more and more of these operating out of homes, so they could be putting water, dirty water back in, and they'll never be found out. You know, there's nothing there to really pick all these up, is there?
Yeah, so one of our obligations is obviously to identify the risk where it's likely. So that is our task. That's something that we are required to do. The risk is still relatively small. The type of things that we do, particularly, I'm trying to think of an example. When we went out and provided potable water to some properties out in the northeast, potentially residential D properties, one of the requirements of getting a connection to the town supply was that they had to disconnect their bore supplies that they had. The reason we did that is to address the backflow risk. So we try and do what we can where we can. And at some point, if somebody was starting up a business which we absolutely knew was a potential risk to the supply, then we would implement the requirements of this policy to address the risk.
I move the recommendation as written, Mr Mayor. Okay. I wanted to say something. To me, Mr Mayor and councillors, this is not an obligation. This is a have to and a must to make sure that the people of Ashburton have clean water. I remember back when the Mayor of Hastings at the time was interviewed, and he said, we were kind of obligated to put a concrete block around the bore. And we know what that caused. That caused deaths. So, obligation is not here, Mr Mayor. It's good that it shouldn't be. We just have to make sure that we do everything possible to make sure the people of Ashburton have clean water.
Item number 9, Treasury report with Paul and Rachel. Paul, would you like to speak to it?
So, Mr Mayor, I'll make a couple of comments. You can see that the debt at 30 June was $70.6 million. It's interesting that our weighted average cost of funds is 2.24, which has come down from 2.42 the previous report. The 2.24, actually, what we used in the LTP was 2.25. So our weighted cost of capital or debt is right on what we used in the LTP. So we've kind of got that right. You'll also see that there's actually the weighted average probably came down because we took a $16.6 million loan out 7 years to 2028, and there was a discussion, I think, in the previous report here where there was a question about how far out you should take debt, and we've increased the time out for debt.
Yeah, thanks for that. Rachel, need anything or no questions, councillors? No. Do we need to receive this report? We do. We do. Councillor Braham, second up. Councillor Rawlinson.
Yep.
Any further debate, discussion? Put the motion on favour. All in favour, please say aye. We received the report. Thank you. Item number 10. Thank you. Natural and Built Environment Bill. Exposure draft July 2021 submission. Ian, welcome. And Jane. You find it. 37. 37. Notes on there. Councillors, any questions? Or Ian, would you like to add anything further to your report?
Just a couple of little points, corrections in the actual text of the submission in Appendix 1. First of all, at the top of the page under submission, of course, it shouldn't say transport emission pathways to achieve net zero emissions. That will need to be obviously changed to reflect the built environment bill draft. And then in section 10, under local democratic participation, on the third line, there's a slight syntax error there with an A that shouldn't be there. And then on the second to last line of the last paragraph, in the last paragraph, or that paragraph, I should say, in para 10, it says that the consent authority, the territorial authority, should be the consent authority for all types of resource consent, including those administered by regional councils. That should be except those currently administered by regional councils. I don't think we're, well, not sure whether we're currently equipped to deal with ECAN resource consents at the moment.
I just have one question before I go to Councillor Mackay. If this bill is passed, what extra requirements and costs will it put on the people of this district? Could you have a guess at?
It's not an easy question. No. The short answer to it, Mr Mayor, is we don't know. At the moment, the exposure draft is quite basic. It's only a few pages long. The devil will be in the detail, and as yet, most of the detail is still unknown. The exposure draft at the moment doesn't include subdivisions or enforcement, for example, so we still don't actually know who's going to do those things and how.
But to follow on from that, as part of our submission, could we put in there, I don't know what the words are, but you could probably make them up, we do not expect extra cost to be put upon the people of the district because of this,
we can certainly,
or something like that.
We can certainly add that. What we have got in there is that we think there's an issue for resourcing generally for councils and for iwi, because there's a much greater role for iwi, but they're not resourced sufficiently to be able to provide that level of support at the moment.
And they will have to be resourced, and I dare say whoever the applicant is will be paying for that. So it will add cost, which there's just so many costs coming down the. Yeah. Doesn't look like it at the moment, but when it gets to the final stages, you don't know what's coming.
In the formulation of the plans, that's not applicants, that's regional councils will be leading that plan formulation process. But we take your point, we'll add something to that effect.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
I agree with you, Mr Mayor. I also agree with Mr Hyde that except in that last paragraph that he talked about, because there's no way this council, no due respect to all staff members, there's no way we have the capability to issue water consents and air consents in Ashburton to the satisfaction of the Environment Court.
At this stage. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Is it correct to push from, it looks as if the new bill will take some of the planning power that we have at the moment, that will be override district plans so that developers will have a much freer hand than they have now?
I think through the chair that the comment that Jane just made before, the devil is in the detail. The submission's very clearly weighted to ensure that the expectation is that the district council will still retain some authority in terms of local decisions, but there are competing priorities in the new legislation as it's laid out. There's a desire to free up the ability to develop, but equally there's a desire to be more stringent, I guess you'd call it, on environmental matters. So at the moment, as Jane said, it's a very brief draft and it says a lot of things, but those sort of details that you're asking about, it's still kind of unclear. So this is what we're trying to do in the submissions is to try and explore those bits and to yeah.
I think through you, Mr Mayor, just to add to that, Councillor Wilson's comment about developers, I think it might be tougher because there are going to be, it's going to be quite prescribed about what you can and can't do. So in some respects, it reminds me a little bit of years ago of the Town and Country Planning Act, where you had activities that were actually prohibited, and that's proposed again in this. So there'd be things you couldn't even apply for consent if they're prohibited. One thing that it's hard to see whether there's any change or not is there'll still be a tension between those wanting to develop and protection of the environment, and that I can't see that tension disappearing with this act.
Supplementary. Yep. Is this typical of this government's legislation? They give us a broad outline, but they don't tell us the actual, when you get into the three waters, the whole thing is the same. They've got a principle, but you try and delve into it and they say they haven't decided or they haven't laid it out. Must be very difficult for us to answer that sort of.
Actually, with this one, I think it's quite different. I can't comment on the three waters because I don't know a lot about that. But this has gone above and beyond the usual democratic process because you've got two bites of the cherry. So first of all, you've got this first exposure draft, and I've never come across that before. So this submission that you're supporting today will go to the select committee, and they're hearing all of the submissions as they come in. Then all that feedback will go into a more detailed bill, which will then go through the normal submission and select committee process. So it's two bites at the cherry. So I think they, to be fair, are actually really trying hard to get this right.
Thank you. I've just got two questions, and they're actually for you, Mr. Mayor. Is the Mayoral Forum also putting in a submission? Have you heard if they will put a submission in as well? And if we vote for this submission, then would the Mayor's name also be on the bottom of this submission, or just the CE's? Maybe that's a question for Jane.
I was actually going to very deftly flip that question back to the Chief Executive.
We can put whatever name gives council comfort that it represents council. In the end, the submission is from council, and whether or not it's signed by myself on behalf of council, or maybe the Mayor and I could do it together to, clearly show that it's from the elected group. Okay. So add the Mayor.
So we'll co-sign it. Councillor Brown.
If there's no more question from Mr. Mayor, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations as it stands.
Looks like we're there. Councillor Brown, a second up. Councillor Wilson. Respect to your motion.
No, thank you. I'm quite happy what has been done there on the top table.
Any speakers for or against? Councillor Mackay.
I'll for discussion, but there has long been a move in Canterbury for those that understand the regional policy statement and also understand the region and how some plans, district plans, make it hard for developers because there is no continuity, or the words are not the same, or the definitions are not the same. So there is room for a regionalised approach, but I struggle with a lot of the words in here, so I'll be voting in favour of the submission. But bear in mind, on what has been talked about at region over the years at a regional level, there are some savings for developers and ultimately developing sections. If there's a same status quo of definitions across the region, so developers know exactly what a word means right across the region, not changing some of the definitions district by district by district.
Any further speakers to the motion or against? If not, I'll put the motion in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. We'll move over to item 12, naming of road 181 Archibald Street. And again, Ian and Jane, Anything to add?
Yeah.
Ian?
Now, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to admit that there is a mistake in this report, a reasonably significant one, in that one of the recommended name options, Carr Street, for some reason it wasn't identified that that is already an existing name in Methven. I'm sure Councillor McMillan was itching to turn a light on with that one if I hadn't found it. The suggestion there is, because the second option, this is for the second name, Winslow Road is also an existing name within the district. Then the logical third option, Sheep Pen Street, would be the option for the sale yards. It's fitting for the area, I believe.
I was just wondering, because it's now, those two are now not options, should we go back, or have you gone back to the developer and asked them if they would have another preferred name if they're not that keen on Sheep Pen?
Yeah, well, that's why the option there is for three choices, because the council's is a requirement under the policy. So they have nominated that name. So I think it's within your discretion to decide if you wish.
Councillor Lovett?
I support the sheep pen name because it actually goes with the sale yards and that is the area. But I've just got a question. The council road right beside there, they're busy piping it at the moment. That's going to be the entrance to all this new development. What happens to the stopover there with all the trucks and the houses that get parked up there at night? Will that disappear with all this new development going on there? Because it is often used by truckies and trailers and that.
No.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think either of us are able to answer that question, sorry. No.
It is private, isn't it? And the developer can develop as they see fit, and that fits the
within the framework.
Within the framework
plan,
you've got, of course, of course. Just one question: the word street was Carr Street, is now going to change to another name, Sheep Pen Street.
Yep.
Does a street have to be a straight through, or
it can be either?
It can be either, right?
Yes, yes.
Because it's not you get the end and you turn around and go back again. That's fine. Yep. Councillor Mackay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the officer, Mr. Hyde. Would you like more time to discuss options with the developer?
As I guess through the chair, as I mentioned previously, that the applicants have nominated three options. I think from my discussions with them, they were keen to get a resolution. So yeah.
Yep. So Road 2 is going to be Sheep Pen Street.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got two questions. Have they obviously been in contact with NZTA regarding access to the State Highway 1?
Through the chair, yes. This development has gone through the subdivision process already. So yes, they have. Yeah.
And the other question, whether it's in our jurisdiction regarding contamination on the site for housing. Is that under our jurisdiction, or who actually covers that?
Through the chair again, this is not for a residential development. This is an industrial development, this one.
Councillor McMillan?
I was going to move the motion since we're just talking
I've got
about the...
couple of questions perhaps. Are there questions, councillors?
Are they regarding the name of it?
Yeah. Questions regarding the naming of the road? Councillor?
You have a car, what have you got in Methven, a car street or a car road or a
street?
So can we not have this be car place or car crescent or...
It's not what they asked for.
Oh, because they didn't specifically nominate the...
Also, that doesn't fit with the Australian-New Zealand addressing standards. So even if it's car street and car place, that's enough to cause confusion and you could end up with the mail going missing.
What little mail there is now. But...
And emergency services as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Lawson?
Just very pleased to see it change to Sheep Pen Street, and I had been going to suggest that regardless of Carr Street. I'm pleased it's not available. I think it's much more appropriate with the new name.
Councillor Lovett?
And I'd second that. I think it's...
Okay, you're just agreeing with, and we'll have a move. Councillor McMillan wished to move before she signalled. You're second. Right.
Yeah.
And Carr Street to now be Sheep's Pen
Street. Yes. Everyone clear on that? Okay, no further discussion, debate. I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Item number 13 and 5M's water treatment plant feasibility study. Dan, you've got speaking rights on this matter. If you'd like to come and sit where Councillor Falloon would be. Oh, she wasn't actually. And welcome, Neil, Andy. We've got this detailed report in front of us, and it's certainly topical at the moment because of the boil water notices we've had in Methven, which we're not that happy with, but it is what we've had, and this report will go some ways to fixing that problem. So anything further you'd like to add or further to the report?
Yeah, look, thanks for the opportunity. One thing I would like to just bring councillors up to speed with, some time ago we did consider drilling an exploratory bore, and the idea was there that if we could find high quality deep groundwater, it would solve a lot of problems. Now that work hadn't been progressed at this point because we got redirected onto confirming the feasibility of this 5M's plant, which is obviously the subject of today's report. In regard to the drilling option, we're aware that we've been approached by a company offering to take on that risk as a commercial venture, on the prospect of potentially, if they were successful, they would then sell it back to council. So they're taking a risk, they would sell that back to council. Unfortunately, to date, the proposed locations that they have put forward have some issues with them. They're not suitable for citing a community bore, and we haven't progressed that. I suppose, given there is still this unanswered question about deep drilling, if council were of a mind to, we could progress both matters in tandem, in parallel. So we could, if council are happy with the report today and happy with the recommendations today, we could progress forward with the detailed design of a membrane treatment plant, as indicated here. But we could also engage in discussions with the company that was offering this bore idea, and have that being advanced alongside. Now, at some point, we will get an answer on the bore drilling, good or bad, and we can either pivot our design work to utilisation of a deep source, or we can carry on, and we will be further ahead if the bore wasn't successful. So yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a rabbit hole I'm going down, but I just wanted to make sure council had that available to them when they're looking at this report.
Yeah, thanks for that update, Andy, because it is there. We have, and through the mayor, the request has come in that they wish to drill a well, and they think they would be successful in getting water. You'll never know until you actually do it, and if it was successful, we'd all be grateful for that. But if it's not, then we need to move along this other path as well to solve Methven's boil water notice problems sooner rather than later. And we need to keep pushing on. So if the two could run in parallel, I think would be quite good. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I've got one. Through the chair, so just to clarify, putting a membrane plant in will stop our boil water notices for Methven and Methven Springfield. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the work that Becca have done, most of the investigation work they've indicated, they talk about conventional treatment or a membrane plant. Now, the reason they leave the word conventional treatment in the mix is that in some cases that can be slightly cheaper. But with the knowledge that a membrane plant will ultimately be that's the gold standard, if you will, in terms of a solution. I think because of the the issues with the cartridge route that we went down, and we did that for good reason at the time. It was a fairly expensive capital upgrade, but we wanted to go down that path. I think we're probably better to aim for the membrane because of the surety we get.
Thank you. And supplementary, Methven Springfield has supplies some stock water as well. So is that going to be a problem?
Yeah. So we've looked at we've looked at the idea that the rural agricultural supplies, whether we should pursue the point of entry treatment option. And I think we will most certainly go down that path for likes of Montalto. It's a relatively smaller number of properties involved, and we've seen the sort of exposure drafts of the legislation around that, or the regulations around these systems, and it's certainly looking like a better option in that case. The problem with Methven Springfield is that we're talking upwards of 70 connections, and we effectively still have to have the same requirements on us around the raw water quality, or at least the quality of the water that's reaching the system before it then gets treated and goes into the house. So at that scale, we're a wee bit dubious that it would be cost effective, because operationally we'll be looking after a dispersed range of 70 odd little mini treatment plants, plus we've still got an eye on the main treatment plant to ensure the raw water hitting them is up to scratch. So that's why we've stumped for this option of combining the schemes.
Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, could I ask, are we party to where this well that's going to be put down, that if it's successful, we may reap the benefit of it?
Yeah, so the process to date has been the company has come to us with a couple of different sites, and so far those sites have been discounted for issues around what would be the future viability of the site from a public water supply point of view. And for instance, if we have to have a view towards source protection, and if the site is currently receiving stormwater, then that's not going to be a satisfactory site. If the site chosen happens to be a contaminated site, well, again, that's not suitable for a public water supply. If council was of a mind to want to advance that in parallel, instead of waiting for them to come up with another site, we would give them some guidelines to work within. Whether that's council land or a buffer away from our existing infrastructure, so that the cost of establishing a source would be minimised if it were successful.
Just one supplementary. So at this stage, there's been no chosen site.
No,
Okay,
nothing confirmed at this point.
So to expedite that further, would it be you who gets some sites and we give them to the person who wants to do it, and let them either approve or reject whether them wanting to put a well down?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
keep coming back and asking, we keep rejecting. Let's go the other way.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so that was the intention. Is again, if council's of that mind, we would give them a framework to operate within, whether that was distance from our infrastructure, council-owned property, whatever the framework is, we would provide that up front, and then they would go and do their wizardry on that and come up with a proposal.
great. So we need to do that sooner rather than
Yeah.
later. Great. Dan, if you're wanting to ask any questions, you could just, you know the process, push a button. Thanks. I have Angus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got one or two questions. Does the officer, on a scale of 1 to 10, the chances of well water being obtained through this?
Yeah, I honestly, councillors, I don't think I could go there with a percentage. I mean, it will be low, And I think I was here a while ago saying that it would be a low probability of success. But yeah, again, the win is significant if you can get it.
In the history of the Ashburton District Council, have the officers of the council ever suggested an ultra cautious approach to other wells being put in the district for similar purposes?
Yes.
Thank you. What was the result of the Mayfield extra cautious advice?
We ended up with a highly, potentially non-viable bore. It is an operational bore, but it has had some questionable history.
Okay. I've just got 2 more questions because of that.
2 more.
No, several more actually. Okay. That bore does that bore at Mayfield produce sufficient water to look after what an average household use is plus 20% each day?
It certainly is serving the scheme well at the moment. It's serving the scheme well at the moment.
Was it serving the scheme badly at one stage because of all the water leaks in the pipes and it took meters to fix that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The metering project almost certainly saved the community from a loss of supply.
I have to make a declaration at this point, Mr Mayor. I declare that I was one of the ringleaders in putting that bore in. Because at the time it was no cost to council. It was a benefactor, Mr John Moore from Mayfield, that should actually be congratulated for the community and the money that he put up front.
And I think has been, for that. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 2 questions, only 2. The first one is, with all the water troubles we have at Methven, is the water quality changed over the last 10 years, or what is the problem?
Okay, so there's a couple of factors to that. So when we did the cartridge filtration upgrade a few years ago, that was prior to the intake gallery being upgraded. So we can't confirm it, but there is a school of thought to believe that since that work was done, the supply of the gallery had become slightly variable in water quality. So that's one aspect. In terms of the most recent boil water notices we've had, it is almost entirely laid at the foot of the damage that came through with the river breakout. And at the moment, the supply is still very vulnerable to that overflow of water again, because of course the river protection work up above in that area is only temporary.
Thank you for that. Another question, the well drilling proposal, at cost of the person who's going to do it, or the company. If it is successful, is it being brought to council for cost, or is there a profit margin in?
They have offered to hand over the viable bore for a set figure.
Councillor Cameron.
That was my question. So is a set figure, you have the set figure, you know what it is, and you agree that it's a reasonable approach to take at this stage, based on the set, because presumably if the set figure was greater than the membrane or whatever, you'd be pursuing another avenue, shouldn't you?
No, it's certainly less than the cost of the membrane.
Okay.
I'm not aware that we have formally agreed to the offered price, but we are aware of their set figure offer. I'm not aware of any formal acceptance of that as the deal to be done.
But we will progress it.
Yeah, so that's right. There's no point progressing if it's...
Correct, Councillor McMillan?
I've got another question, and I was going to move the motion, but I see there's a lot more questions coming, so I'll put my light on again in a minute. But my question is, could we have a sort of a timeline, not a timeline, but if we're going to be looking at two options, I think we need 6 months or some sort of time frame that we can go up to. I don't think it should be sort of over the next year or whatever. I think if we could put a time limit on this parallel, whatever you call it, project process, does 6 months sound like it would be achievable, or do we need to look? I just think that if we keep sort of saying for the next year we'll keep looking and looking and looking and nothing happens, and then we get behind on our design. I mean, we want to move this forward as quickly as possible, so I think 6 months would be good. Maybe it could be shorter.
I think to answer that through Mr. Mayor, there's a natural point, and that is the completion of the design. So when the design is complete, then you've got to either decide to proceed with the membrane as designed, and we won't do any more looking for a bore, but up until the fact that the design is complete, your parallel universe still works. So whether that's 3 months or 6 months or 8 months, whatever that time is, that's the logical point when you've got to bail out of exploring both. Get the design done, and then you've got a decision to make. And if there's no viable bore, then it's clear you would look to implement the design. If a viable bore has been found at any point prior to the design being complete, then you can clearly opt for the bore.
Councillor Rawlinson?
Thank you, and I agree with Councillor McMillan's concerns around the timeline, but my question is around the source of the water. So, and I hope that the drilling episode does become fruitful. If it's not, are we going to revert back to using the existing galleries and use?
Yeah, so again, the intent is to have this, what we've been proposing in the LTP, which is detailed design of the membrane plant. Today's report, the recommendation is that we combine the Methven Springfield and Methven plants, and that then provides the opportunity under that scenario to utilise the benefits of both intake galleries to supply the combined scheme. So it provides a lot more flexibility going forward.
Thank you. And supplementary to that, so given the recent events with the water, do those galleries need a lot of work done on them to improve them?
No, so the galleries fundamentally are okay. It's just their risk to that river breakout currently. So as time goes on, there is an assumption that river protection will re-establish and become more secure, and therefore that risk diminishes over time. Environment Canterbury, I understand, are taking this quite seriously in terms of protecting those intakes. So that's, they're meeting their obligations under the legislation as well.
Thank you, because as long as I've sat around this table, we've always many times discussed the galleries, and they seem to be, to my simple way of thinking, the source of a lot of our problems as far as having to upgrade the membranes, and we just seem to be constantly revisiting the issues they provide.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of a water source, they are shallow source water, and with that comes a lot more risk, a lot more variability. But if you're bolting on a membrane plant on the end of that, then those issues become reduced significantly.
Thank you.
Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, has there been any further investigation done in trying to find another source of water? Because the source of water is what concerns me the most. Now, just down the plains at about the Lyndhurst mark, I'd say about the 240 metre contour, there must be wells there or places there that could get reliable water. And I wonder, are there wells there that perhaps council could take over from farmers who now have reticulated irrigation rather than their own wells? Has any work been done on that? We would have to pump it to Methven, of course. It's a long process. There's no magic wand, but there should be good water there, and we should be able to get it to Methven. Not too difficult.
Yeah, so back when Becker Consultants were doing the original work around our individual plants and the issues we were having, They did raise the prospect of groundwater as a source option, but their report at that time was fairly limited. They didn't explore it very far. So we specifically asked them to do some additional work around groundwater, the viability of a groundwater source nearby, and that work didn't give us any confidence that it was going to be viable. And of course, that's why when we looked at the feasibility of the 5Ms plant, we were well down the plains. We were going somewhere where it was almost certain that we were going to find water.
Okay.
So that particular risk was taken out of the equation.
Thank you.
Chair Dan?
Thank you. Through the chair, my question was around timing, and the chief executive sort of answered that. But as Mr. Guthrie said, to be done in parallel, and I think that's the key message here. And it's, if you were to delay the treatment plant while you're doing the well, it would not be acceptable to anybody, I wouldn't have thought. It's all about being parallel and getting to a point where you have to get off the membrane plant if nothing else is working out. So that was just one.
So if we started the process today, which we're going to start shortly, when do you think that membrane plant could possibly be working by?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. The difficulty, as I understand it, I mean, we can put things like design, and we can expedite design. So there's things around that we can do. The difficulty is we won't know the answer around the technology until some way down the path. And then the question will be, well, okay, at what point do we commit purchase of that technology? And some of the stuff, well, almost certainly will have to be imported in some form. And then, of course, we then raise the prospect of delays around COVID, and the whole supply chain has been compromised around the world. So there are some serious risks there around delay. I wouldn't like to say how soon.
Mr. Mayor, just to extrapolate that out, if the membrane is to be the viable solution because the bore doesn't work out, then getting on with the design, bringing that to council for approval, and then ordering the solution, and by the recommendation that Andy's made to bring forward the year 2 budget to enable that to happen, that is the fastest we can do it. So Andy's right, you couldn't put a line in the sand and say that's the date, because we all know supply chains globally are very disrupted, but we couldn't do it any faster than getting on with the design, approving that design, and then ordering the gear.
But it's not years though, it's in probably the single years rather than the multiple years away.
It'll be the very fastest that we could do it.
Yeah, correct. I just have one question before I go to Councillor McMillan, and it's on the Becker report, page 86. It talks about changes in water quality, and they make comment about land use changes in the catchment may result in the deterioration of water quality. I wonder if you could ask Becker as to what those land use changes would be under today's environment. Because I'd have a guess there are no land use changes, but it's only a small part of their report. But just point that out, it seems to be a common word phrase that's used, land use change. Well, there is none anymore. Councillor McMillan.
If there's no further
still have some questions.
I would like to move.
Councillor Mackay. Lane, you a question?
No, second it.
Okay. Angus, you a question?
Oh.
Hang on. Go off, Lane. You go off.
What input, if any, will the Methven Community Board and the Ashburton District Councillors have into what options are in the feasibility, exploring that's going to happen in the before the design's done?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't understand the question.
Okay, if any, what input will the Methven Community Board and the Ashburton District Councillors have in the what design options are considered for the final recommendation to council?
So, if I understand it correctly, what I'm hoping today is that if the recommendation's passed, we will commit to detailed design of a membrane treatment plant. We'll also commence discussions with the company around the bore, if that's what happens. As far as input into detailed design, I'm not sure how much input we can facilitate.
Well, Mr Mayor, because I've got an additional question because the Chief Executive is shaking his head. So I'm presuming that there's no input. My question was around, supplementary question is, so if we give the go-ahead for this, there'll be no talk of altering present take points or anything like that, or alteration of or extending the galleries?
No, that's not on the scope for us at this point.
Okay, just for clarification, could you please tell us, because you'll be better than I will be, where the present Methven Springfield intake is?
Yeah, the Methven Springfield intake is a few hundred metres further west of the Methven intake.
What's the land use change over top of it and around it?
I'm not aware of any recent changes.
What is the land use change around and above it, on top of it?
You're asking the question, what is the land use?
What is the land use? So there's no change?
I don't believe so.
It's in the middle of a farm?
Yes.
Livestock farm?
Yes.
Do you think it would be a good idea for the Ashburton District Council and Methven Community Board to reconsider placing a gallery for human consumption away from such a activity? For example, closer to the hills, e.g. Pudding Hill, e.g. Spaxton.
That's entirely up to council.
So supplementary, how do we get input into that?
Via whatever resolution you next make. We are currently thinking that we're going to design a treatment for the existing intakes in parallel to exploring the bore option, subject to that being added to the resolution, to the recommendation, which I suspect it will be. If council wishes us to do something other than that, then that should be part of the resolution you are about to consider.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McMillan, you're looking to move?
I am, and I was going to add a number 5, and I haven't quite got the words, but investigation into, I've got another water source, but it's probably a bore, to run parallel with the design.
Well, if you stuck with water source,
then
that would
okay.
pull in Councillor Mackay's discussed as well, would it?
Well, it's less clear to officers, and it opens up a very wide-ranging debate, remembering while we are designing. So as soon as the design is complete, our hope is that we can then address the issue of Methven's water quality. If we are having a resolution as wide as to examine future water source, we may still be poring over maps at the time the design is complete, and not then knowing whether we're continuing to explore 1, 2 or 3 different options. We will clearly do what council's will is, but that is a little different to the current debate as we would understand it around a parallel process around a bore.
Okay.
But if that is council's will, that's clearly what we will do, but it's a very different thing.
I think there's some urgency to this, so I think a bore, we need to be looking at another bore going forward. So that would be my recommendation for number 5. So I'll read them. That council receives a report titled 5M's Water Treatment Plant Feasibility Study Report, July 2021, Becker Limited, and that no further work be undertaken on the larger 5M's water treatment plant concept. Number 3, that detailed design of a treatment upgrade solution for the Methven and Methven Springfield schemes proceeds on basis of a single treatment facility. Number 4, that a physical works budgets for the Methven and Methven Springfield water treatment upgrades be brought forward to the 2021-22 financial year. And number 5, that investigation into a bore to run parallel with the design. Does that make sense? I'd like to move that.
Okay, moved, seconded. Councillor Cameron? Oh, you had your light on earlier, Lane. Councillor seconded it. Open for discussion. Do you want to talk to your motion, Councillor McMillan? No, you haven't talked to it yet. If lights off and Councillor McMillan will talk to the motion. Lights off.
I was just going to ask.
No.
Oh.
Councillor McMillan, go on.
Thank you. As you can imagine, this has been a rather tough couple of months with the Methven and Methven Springfield boil water notices coming up. Firstly with the 1 in 200 year floods, and then about 6 weeks later when we had another 120 mils of rain. The last boil water notice that came on pretty much came at the worst time of the year for Methven. It was the July school holidays are the busiest time of the year for our town with visitors, and it was very, very stressful to say the least on Methven businesses, especially accommodation and eating establishments. We bore the brunt of it. There were a lot of unhappy people. There's been a lot of stories in the media. I think council has to be congratulated in getting a tanker up so quickly to Methven, and then we worked on getting mini tanks to the preschool so that they could open to Methven House, had them in place ready to go at the 3 Methven schools. And when the boil water notice was extended after the first 3 days, we got some other tanks into the local businesses just to take the stress off. It's something we've got in the budget. Bringing it forward would be ideal so that we can move forward with this. There have been talks that it's third world. It's not quite that, but it can be very stressful for a lot of people. And I think while we've got this money sitting there ready to go on the budget, bring it forward. Look at the option of the bore, and let's just get it done.
Councillor Cameron.
Well said, Liz. I have a question with regarding.
Finish questions. We're on to
I have a
debate.
discussion.
Yeah.
Point to discuss.
Great.
With regarding the intake on somebody's farm, I want to understand, please, because we haven't addressed that, what it means to have a shallow intake on somebody's farm where we're sourcing the water from, where it's used for for grazing of livestock, presumably, or whatever. Is that a source of contamination, and is that going to become an issue further down the track?
In terms of any water source, the activities that are going on above it obviously do have some impact. But as under the Land and Water Plan, there are protections around what activities you can do. And those, the criteria for those is based on how much likelihood there is an impact from them, arising from them. So we have to be confident that the systems that they've got in place are dealing with that issue. In the case of those water sources, the protection zones are quite large.
Okay.
They're very large. So we've got a bit of a backstop there.
So in summary, the council and the council staff are reasonably comfortable with the intake being where it is for the foreseeable future.
Well, yeah, that's right. There's sufficient tools and regulation around that protect it. So if the landowners in question decided to try and do some sort of significant intensification, then that would trigger a requirement to get a discussion with Environment Canterbury, and then that would trigger a discussion with us.
Because we require no further embarrassment with regards to our water.
Yeah.
Caroline, can't hear you because your light's gone off.
Oh, well.
Just thinking about that, who owns the land at that Springfield gallery is on?
Yeah, look, I can't recollect the owner, but
it's not the council.
We've got easements over it, and they're exclusive easements, so they're fenced easements.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to support Councillor McMillan in amending that motion. Methven's had enough, so we've just got to get on with it.
Councillor Rawlinson.
And I support Councillor McMillan's words too, but my comment is I'm disappointed when you look at the map on page 63 of where all the sites are, that we haven't had a serious look at Councillor Letham's suggestion of maybe a bore over in that Lyndhurst area. We talked about it at length here, excuse me, one day when the idea was mooted, and thought it had merit, and it's easy for the I know the so-called experts to say, oh no, there's nothing suitable there, but have they had a serious look and maybe have a talk to use a bit of local knowledge through that process, because there could be something sitting over on that side that's not being used that could be a good, good source of clean water.
I think the officer said that they did have a look at it and it wasn't feasible to push it that far, I think. Yeah, that's what he said.
I'd just like to know, I'm curious to know how big a look they had.
I don't know.
Just my comments, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Of course, I'm going to endorse Liz, Councillor McMillan's thing there. On Monday at the Community Board, after quite a bit of discussion, we moved the motion knowing it wouldn't come to this meeting, it'll come to the next council meeting, but endorsing point 3 and 4. We'd really like to see it progressed and progressed fast as possible without any delays. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
Mr Mayor and Councillors, I'm in favour of all 5 points as moved by Councillor McMillan. I think it's urgency. Especially the well. Putting ratepayers' money into a well up there, I think, is a farcical option. But if we can pull something off what happened similar at Mayfield, I think it's a real option that should be looked at to prove all the well records and all the geologists wrong. I love it when that kind of thing happens. Bit of local knowledge. Local knowledge is very easy to look at, Mr Mayor. One only has to go to the GIS systems of the maps from Environment Canterbury and the bore logs and the well takes, and you'll find that you're below the Arrel Road, for those that know that area, and you're on the north or eastern side of Line Road, and just above Lauriston, before you get any water of any quantity that could be used for a town. Yes, there is a beautiful well at Lyndhurst, Old Lyndhurst School, which we are a part of, but that in no way has capacity, if you look at the records, to service a town, growing town such as Methven. It still concerns me, Mr Mayor, about the place where our water is going to be taken from, and I would prefer to take a precautionary approach. I think we should also look at moving the Methven Springfield water take closer into the mountains, away from all farming areas into an area that has a lot of bush, natural bush on the top side of it. Therefore, I would move an amendment that a 6 be added to look at the take point for the Methven Springfield water scheme.
Could you get some words around that? Number 6.
Well, number 6 would be that staff have a look at
Investigate.
do a feasibility study on moving the Methven Springfield water take site
further west. Just wait for your light to go on. Now it's on. Hang us off.
Thank you. Just a point of order. Well, clarification, we already have an amendment. We can't have another amendment on the amendment. We can have a notice of further amendment.
What do you wish to do, Councillor
notice of an
Mackay?
amendment.
You have a notice of an amendment. And that number is number 6, and it is to just repeat your...
For the staff to report back on the feasibility of moving the Methven Springfield water take point.
Okay, good. And that shouldn't slow down anything? Yeah. Councillor, Hamish.
I think the reality is that it might. We have finite resources, so we are currently going to brief someone to do a design. The same people that are doing that will be trying to propose some sites for the private person drilling the bore, and the same person, people that are doing that, will be examining the Methven Springfield gallery point. So while we are up for all that, if that is council's will, I think it is likely that there would be some delays to each and all of those if we did, if we have to do all three. But they may not be significant, and that's not to say we shouldn't do it, but there may well be some impact because resources are finite.
If I may be so bold, Mr Mayor, effectively what Councillor Mackay is saying, that if this amendment is lost, he's going to give notice that he will move what he's just said. That's my understanding.
Yep. I haven't spoke. Councillor Mackay?
Once the amendment becomes the motion, I'm then at liberty to move an amendment, am I not?
In fact, you must move it.
I haven't spoken to the motion yet, but I agree with the comments made previously, the recommendation in front. We need to sort Methven's water. It did come at a unkindly time, right in ski season, where Methven is full of people in the school holidays. The timing could not have been worse. And all the people of Ashburton who are connected to a water supply, they pay $1.17 a day for their water. Is that expensive? I don't think so. But it's going to cost more to get it right, and everyone in the district will share getting Methven's water right. So we're all on the same objective here to get it right. So I think I'll take, no, to get process right here, we have to put number 6 first, or...
No, Mr Chairman, you've got an amendment. Councillor McMillan has moved that amendment and has the right of reply.
She's going to get right now.
Yep. Then there's the vote. If the amendment is passed and becomes the substantive motion, then you'll be giving Councillor Mackay the opportunity to then move a further amendment.
Number 6 will come in.
If this is lost, we're back to the original, and then Councillor Mackay is still then free to move a further amendment should he so choose. So you can deal with the amendment first.
Got it, did right. Yeah. Councillor McMillan, right of reply.
Thank you. I hope that all councillors vote for this motion. There is urgency in there, and I also wanted to note the support that the Community Board have given me at the last meeting, or Councillor Letham and I at the last meeting on Monday, for this motion to go forward. So please vote for this.
I'm ready to put the motion, the amendment, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. All clear about that. I am in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Councillor Mackay.
Just before I move the amendment, I'd like to find out who moved and seconded the original motion, please.
Councillor McMillan and Councillor Braham.
Did they also move the what was called the amendment?
We haven't. No.
No. In fact, I take your point, Councillor Mackay. The motion was never an amendment. It was an amendment to the recommendation. So that resolution
was the motion.
Yes. So to be fair to Councillor Mackay's intent, which was well stated, I think he.
Number 6 was the amendment.
The original motion.
Yes.
Number 6 was the amendment.
And the term, give a notice of a further amendment, has perhaps put us down a slightly blind alley, because in fact it should have just been an amendment, not a further amendment, and he didn't need to give notice. He had the ability to do that, and it was the use of the term amendment that created the confusion.
Well, before I go to the amendment,
you tripped the chair up.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for his words. I move an amendment which would be a 6, that the feasibility of movement of the Methven Springfield take point be looked into.
I'm just looking at process here, and we'll take Councillor Mackay's Well, we're going to start this process again. What we did before was not right. So we're going to start the process again. The motion is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Councillor Mackay has put number 6, which is an amendment to that. So, can we have a seconder for that? Councillor Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Brown.
He moved the second.
First motion.
So he cannot. You're correct. Councillor Cameron? So now we need to put the amendment, which is items 1 to 6. Yes, you will do, yep. Councillor Mackay, can you read item number 6? The item number 6, could you, your amendment, could you read it please?
Oh, I
number
actually
6.
haven't got it written down. I thought I had. That the site, the feasibility of moving the site of the Methven Springfield water scheme be reported back to council.
Is number 6. Investigate the feasibility. Investigate the feasibility of moving.
Just want a simple, just a simple.
Yeah.
I actually think Mr. Guthrie will actually know the answer, but I'm not going to ask him now because he would need a wee while to gather his thoughts on it, to be quite honest.
Could I just seek clarification through Mr. Mayor? Does the feasibility include alternative sites? I.e., is the feasibility to examine how we might do that, or is the feasibility to come up with alternative options?
No, the feasibility is to look at the resiting of the gallery.
So looking for alternative sites?
Resiting of the gallery.
So you had a site before, is that where you would like to?
Yeah, Spexton.
To Spexton, is the one to investigate.
But we already have the water take there, so there's no big problem.
So we're only looking at the feasibility of moving it to that one option?
Yep.
Or yep.
No,
So could I suggest that we maybe we pause, Mr. Mayor, and get the wording of clause 6 really clear, so that the officers know exactly what it is that council's asking us to do, because language is actually important. And I'm not trying to delay this unnecessarily, but I think if the wording can be really clear, we'll know exactly what we're doing. And
well, to be quite honest, I don't think the point, the water take point for Methven Springfield is any longer in this day and age in a suitable position, and it should be moved to another site where we actually have sufficient water take to do it, and there's already a gallery there that could be expanded to work in with another private scheme, and it's up underneath the bush, and it's called Spaxton Take.
right, so we're starting to get clearer. Well, I'm getting clearer as to what you're asking us to do, because if it's just to examine alternative sites, that's right. But that was what was originally said. So if we're being asked to look at a particular site called a gallery that exists in Spaxton, and we're comparing that with the existing site, that's a defined piece of work. I don't imagine it's as time consuming as any other site. That's a material thing to have it clarified in that fashion.
I actually fully believe that Mr. Guthrie and his staff have probably got enough information to bring a report back, but I'm not going to ask him straight now because he'll have to take into a number of considerations before he answers that question.
Yeah.
Right.
So can we have the exact wording of
So,
So we need the exact wording for number 6.
okay, that transferring the Methven Springfield take point to the Spaxton take point be investigated by staff.
Right, thank you, got that. So that is the amendment to the motion. So, Councillor McMillan. And that's been moved by Angus and second. Carolyn, that's right. And seconded by Carolyn. Liz.
My concern that is, I agree that it's something that needs to be investigated, but I think that if it's going to be time consuming and holds up the process of the recommendation we just made, then I wouldn't be in favour of it.
We don't think it will hold up much. Well, Annie, could you
I don't know whether it would hold things up, but it is a distraction we probably don't need right now, for what it's worth.
Right, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Question, is there one gallery? Are there two different galleries you're talking about?
Two different galleries.
So one is okay, we don't have to check that at all, but we come to look at the Springfield. Why are we doing one and not two?
So the gallery for Methven Springfield,
Is different than the Medford one.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, two different galleries, two different water supplies, but they're quite close. And so as we understand the amendment, it is that the intake or the gallery for the Methven Springfield be compared to an alternate site for that gallery at Spaxton. The Methven gallery is not under question in terms of its site. We are simply getting on with the design to treat that water such that it avoids boil water notices, i.e. the membrane.
Another question if I can. It's pretty close together, so why can't it be fed from one point, from one intake? Why do we need two?
As I indicated in the report, one of the advantages of combining the schemes is that we get to potentially take advantage of both galleries once the schemes are combined. The only matter I'd say about the investigation into the Spaxton solution is that the Spaxton scheme is a private stock water scheme, and it currently doesn't suffer the issue of a potable public water source. Whereas if the combining of the schemes could dramatically change their profile.
Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a certain sympathy to Councillor Mackay's request, but I can't vote for the amendment of adding number 6 in there because we just should get on and get the Methven thing sorted. We can look for another source of water for Methven Springfield at a later date. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Mackay, you haven't had the right to speak yet. Well, do you get the right to speak on an amendment? Yes, you do.
I had to speak
Yes.
on the amendment.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, for those that understand the catchment, you realise that the north branch of the Ashburton River comes from away up in the back country, and sometimes there's a cliff away up in the back country called Red Cliffs. Those of you that have done some hiking have gone up the Rikaya Gorge and you've walked to the Red Cliffs hut, which actually overlooks the North Ashburton catchment. And for ages I've been thinking the danger of Methven having one catchment to get its water supply from. The Pudding Hill stream is a totally different catchment. It's in the front of the hills. And sometimes you'll notice that the Ashburton River at the bridge here will be very dirty, but the south branch will be clean, Boyers and Taylor Stream will be clear, and Pudding Hill Stream will be clear. It's because of that cliff at Red Cliffs that collapses every so often in the northwest rain and sends dirty water down the north branch. So this is trying to tidy up this whole discussion today is looking at tidying up the supply of Methven for the future. So this is my one chance as a former resident proudly of Methven to try and tidy it up once and for all and get it right the first time instead of playing around. And I are of the opinion that we need a 2 take point for the town of Methven. In Ashburton we have several take points. In fact, we actually spent a lot of money once connecting the Tinwald well, so it could supply Ashburton as well as Tinwald, because Ashburton wells can also supply Tinwald. So the Ashburton township has got what you call belts and braces to the lowest precautionary factor you could have, and that's the same protection I want for Methven. So this is, as I see it, the only chance that I have to promote a take point and get staff backing is for a simple report to be done on it. There have been problems with the Methven Springfield take for a number of years. In fact, if the water had been clean enough right from the start, we wouldn't have got the Campylobacter that caused for the treatment of the water in the first place, because it was only built as a stock scheme. But because the water was so good, everyone drank it. And that's the dilemma we got into. So by having 2 take points for Methven, I think it's a good idea. Both can be treated at the same treatment, so they don't actually become potable water, in my opinion, until they've gone through the treatment station. So I don't see any trouble in taking a pipe out of the Spaxton's take down to the treatment centre to treat it, for it to become a potable scheme for Methven Springfield and for the residents of Methven. I think it's belts and braces, the lowest precautionary approach we can take, and I think we should consider it, and it's a cheap option to consider it. I believe that Mr Guthrie and his staff know what it would take and be able to write a short report on it and bring it back to council at the appropriate time.
Councillor Cameron?
We've just heard from the Chief Executive that words matter. I also think in this day and in this age, image also matters. And having an intake on private land which may be used for whatever purposes, which we cannot influence and cannot control over time, I think needs review. I take it, the point of Councillor Mackay that, and I don't know because I haven't spoken to the officers, but hopefully generating the report will not be too much of a distraction, because it sounds as if the report is basically already available. It's just a matter of collating information, as I understand. And I think if we can get it right, it would be wonderful for us and for the Methven residents, so that we don't come back to this table in 3 years' time and say, well, we've got a problem with coli, we've got a problem with nitrates, or whatever, and we need to address it once and for all. And it seems a cost-efficient sort of suggestion.
With there being no further speakers, did you need to write a reply, Councillor? I've been wondering about that. So I'm going to put the amendment. I'm in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Now the amendment becomes the motion. So I'm going to put the motion. Correct me if I've got it wrong. I'm going to put the motion now, which is items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. I'm in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. We got there, councillors. We now move to back a few pages to, I'll see Bruce and Lauren here, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you, Neil and Andy, for that. Page 44, yeah. We've got your welcome to Lauren and Bruce. We have your report in front of us. If you'd like to add anything or just take questions. And thank you for coming down today.
Just ki te rangatira tēnā koe. Just wanted to acknowledge some of the challenges that have been faced in the district recently, and just pass on our thoughts with you. As you are well aware, Christchurch is well accustomed to resilience and recovery. And we reached out. It seemed like you all had it very well under control, but we were sort of consistently putting out your comms through our channels as well. But you know, really pleased to see on the drive down here that, from my eyes, but I think further away where you can't see, it's still pretty dire. But you know, really wanted to pass those on.
Thanks for that. Thanks for those kind comments. Your report, for that or question?
So we have a short presentation for you. It'll be reasonably fast. It's quite a tactical activity to show you, but I also wanted to give you a strategic update on some conversations with central government around ongoing funding for tourism support. So I'll quickly let Bruce run through the activity with you, conscious of time, so we'll keep it quick.
And if there are any questions to the report, then I'm happy to take those as well.
Okay, what do you want to do first? Do you want to take the questions now?
Let's take questions first. That's fantastic.
Councillors, questions? Councillor Cameron.
I can go. Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for your sentiment earlier. That's much appreciated. With regards to the mega meet, you mentioned here you've got, I think, 38 businesses. Yes, 38 businesses across 2 regions. What were these businesses like? What can you give me an example of what type of businesses they were?
All of them were tourism, or
like travel agents and things.
No. So hotels, motels, activities, like ballooning companies, for an example, and we had a couple of others that were suppliers of those operators as well. So, for an example, we had a company that was growing their own herbal products, and they were packaging them and then looking to market them to some of our local operators. So that's the type of scenarios.
So was it, can I ask you an additional question, please? So essentially, for example, I'm just pulling things out of the air. The hot air balloon operators might have met a hotel person and they could sort of leverage off each other.
And to create packaging. So
Yeah.
from a sales perspective, a tourism consumer will often look for the easiest way to create their holiday. So when you can get neighbours collaborating, it's beneficial.
Absolutely. And a really good example of that is adventure ballooning Discovery Jet, which is on the Rangitata Gorge, and a new company called Dirt Bandits have collaborated and created a really fantastic product that we're retailing at $499, and it's been grabbed all over the country. So I'm really wrapped with that, and that's just one package that came out of that mega meeting.
Liz?
Thank you, and good to see you both. And I was also at that mega meet, and there was definitely a huge buzz in the room from all the different operators, so that was great. But I just wanted to talk about our Aussie market, and that's obviously under a bit of strain at the moment because they can't get here. How has that been up to now? Had there been many Australians coming over to visit, or was it purely sort of people coming from Australia to visit families? Like, what kind of dent has it put in the market because they now can't come here?
Yeah, so inbound international from Australia was 69% visiting friends and relatives, about 13% leisure, and the remainder was business travel. For Mid-Canterbury and Ashburton, we actually think that the impact was quite significant. You'll see on the report there's a dashboard of data. In the period between the bubble opening and the 30th of May, when this data closed, $791,000 worth of tourism transactions occurred in the district. It's quite comprehensive for about 6 weeks of spend. So the border closures will be quite significant, particularly on Methven and on Mount Hutt over the ski season. But we hadn't been actively working in Australia beyond awareness building. So we were doing brand building and awareness. There was some ski packaging happening, but primarily we've still continued to focus on the domestic market to make sure that you've got a resilient tourism industry here.
Great, thank you. The graph that or the key visitor insights that you've provided for us, can we get a printout of that next time, because it's very hard to read on here, just some of the...
I've got a printout and can hardly read it myself, actually,
okay.
so we might need to go on A3.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely print it on A3, and then you've got a copy, or I can forward them down to you earlier if you like.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Or could you do it digitally, but have a different type of digit so we can expand it out?
So this is we're creating like an API feed live on a website where you actually can get live data. So you'll be able to go into the website and see this live. So eventually you won't even get kind of a paper report unless that's specifically what you'd like. So that's where we're heading to.
I just have one question. It's around alert levels, and we're on alert level 1. Mm-hmm. In the report here, under alert level 1, it talks about mass events, more than 500 people, not permitted.
Well, that's quite old, I think.
It is actually. That's recently been updated by the government, so that's...
There's no limit on alert level 1
no, there's not.
gatherings yet.
No, that was an old framework that I wrote about a year or 15 months ago, so we may need to update that. I'm not sure this thing.
I've literally just kept that on there just as a reminder of the alert systems that we have in place.
Okay. Lynette?
I was going to say, you never hear much about the travel agents in the business, because a lot of them used to be doing all the overseas travel. What's happened to them? Are they adapting to the New Zealand tourism market, or are they just gone out of business, or what's happening in that space?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. I spend a bit of time with House of Travel most weeks, because we've got a information display within there, and look, their saviour at the moment is Rarotonga right now, and but that's quite a narrow margin of opportunity, because Raro's been sold out very quickly, and there's only, I think at the moment, still only one operating aircraft to Raro at the moment. So yeah, they're a bit limited, but they're definitely using the domestic market to their advantage.
And inbound tour operators, so those that deal with wholesale offshore, have been granted about $500,000 grant from central government to get them through just in the recent announcement by Minister Nash. So that's keeping them alive, to be honest.
Further questions, councillors? Doesn't look like it. Could I have someone move and second that we receive the report from Christchurch NZ? Councillor Lovett, Councillor McMillan. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've just got a presentation for you to show you some of that the campaign activity. Can I use that adapter, or how does it work to get up on screen?
Don't break it, Bruce.
No, that's why I'm asking you the question.
Won't break it.
Oh, fantastic. Let's give that a shot. That's a big list. Yeah, I think so.
That's right.
Where does that come from? Is that yours?
Yeah, I don't know. Sounds like it, doesn't it? Just waiting for that to come through. There we go. So this is just giving you an example of some of the campaigns we've done in Mid-Canterbury in the last couple of months. The first and probably the most important one was the Explore CHC campaign, which is a collaboration across the whole of Canterbury. But this particular period was based on how we do winter different. So we had a very big piece of exposure in the whole campaign. In fact, we were the lead in terms of everything that went on. So this will just give you a bit of an idea of the actual the campaign itself that went out into the market, and we should be able to just play that. It's just not playing. There we go. Yeah, it doesn't seem to want to bring through the sound. Righto. There we go. Latest views about 500,000 on TV. Latest views are about 500,000. So that's that particular video campaign was viewed almost 500,000 times on both TVNZ on demand and also across home use tools as well, so online and also into people's homes through social media. So the concept of it, just so you understand, is we've taken the old ski lift from Mount Hutt and used it to basically fly around the region of Canterbury. It was really well taken. The feedback that we've had through the agency has been tremendous. We're still gathering a lot of that data because it's only just finished. So next meeting I'll have all of the details around what it actually generated. I'll just move forward from there.
We did delay the launch of the campaign slightly. It was meant to go live during the flood, so we delayed it by about 2 weeks. So hence we're a little bit delayed in getting some of the results.
To give you a bit of an idea, there's the Hero billboard in the middle of Queen Street, which is specific to Mid-Canterbury. A couple of others that we have as well around the Auckland region. My screen seems to be... Here we go there. So there's a couple more here that we've also got visuals on, which is Parnell Bridge, Green Lane, Victoria Park, and also Pitt Street, which are highly visible spots for Auckland. And there was a couple in Christchurch and a couple in Wellington also. So we certainly got the best reference points in terms of getting people to understand what we're delivering. Also, we had quite a number of stories that were done through Stuff. I'll alert you to the very bottom of the page on my right hand side there, where it talks about Mid Canterbury getting just over 500,000 impressions and page reviews of nearly 10,800 page reviews. To give you a bit of an idea, Stuff's benchmark, so that's their everyday stuff that's coming through, is only about 5,000 page reviews, and with a clickable rate of only 0.64%, and we were at 2.15. So we know that the storylines work. We know that people were reading them, and that's probably one of the most impressive pieces of research that we've done. So that's I'm really excited about that one. That whole big listicle that you can see down the middle of the page, that was a real driver for that behaviour. So lots of great graphics, but at the same time also some really good storylines. Likewise, this is in all the online stuff, so we've talked about where to eat over winter, the things that you can do off-piece, and we've also got a number of different deals as well. I specifically left the detail of the deals off just for those purposes, but 15%, 20%. We've also obviously kicked in the Kids for Free campaign as well, which is working incredibly well. Anecdotal data from Methven Travel just this week. They've seen a 22% increase in people using the Kids for Free campaign for families. That's off the back of the pre-COVID period. So, and over 95% of their transport from Christchurch, increase of transport from Christchurch through to Methven as well. And some of the reasons for that is it's bloody hard to be able to get rental cars right now. So people are relying on local transport, which is fantastic. So it's literally money coming back into our district as opposed to going offshore with rental car companies and the likes. Another one that we wanted to just take you on a little bit of a journey. Back in March, we had the Today Show join us. Sorry, March? No, it was June, sorry. Had the Today Show with us, and we did 5 live broadcasts direct to Australia. And this was an absolute powerhouse. The numbers are astronomical. It's something like around about 1 million viewers every morning that watch the Today Show. It's now the #1 show that's on their screens. So I'll just play this video for you. It'll just give you an idea in terms of the content that was going over the year. So this is the live show, and then they come to New Zealand and
we might skip through the weather.
Yeah.
If we can.
Yeah, if we can, we'll give it a shot and see if we can skip through it. No, it's not going to do that.
We didn't get Meghan Markle speaking live from Mount Hay, but it does look like we did.
I will just see if we can roll back through that.
We'll send the clip.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
But essentially, look, it's about 15 different mentions of products throughout Mid Canterbury and physically the naming of Mid Canterbury as well. So we'll send that to you, and you can have a bit of it's quite some giggles on it. He also made a huge piece around it where he was sitting riding on the back of a kiwi, and there was quite a lot of commentary right across Australia that morning around Tim riding a kiwi on Mount Hutt. So we got way more exposure than we would typically get. So yeah, it was a pretty good show. but of course it was all live, so that was fantastic. So I'll just skip through that. There's another part to it, and I'll let Lauren go through a couple of strategic points that we've got there.
We are just finalising contract negotiations for the future partnership between Ashburton District Council and Christchurch NZ, which will be briefed to you all separately. But I wanted to update you quickly on some of the strategic objectives that we've been partnering on with the industry over the last quarter to identify what the core needs need to look like over the next 3 years. We will need to readjust them as we move through the COVID environment, but we'll continue to focus on the domestic market with a focus on the Trans-Tasman bubble if and when it reopens and becomes more stable. So we have a focus to grow domestic market share. We've set some targets for that, but also greater diversification of target markets in domestic audiences. So not just looking at ski and not just looking at families, but looking at reducing seasonality, focusing on some summer product development, spring, autumn, and getting a greater focus across the remit of the country of who we can attract to the destination. We will retain a focus on international markets. I think we can't avoid the fact that in the long term we will get international visitors back, and we'd like to keep awareness alive. But as we move forwards, we feel quite strongly that a strong district brand identity and proposition will be required. Which leads me into discussing central government funding and COVID recovery for tourism. In May of this year, Minister Stuart Nash came to Christchurch and announced a fund called the Recovery Reset and something else that starts with RA that I've forgotten. This is a $26 million fund to support regional tourism organisations of New Zealand. Christchurch NZ has been allocated $1.5 million of this third-party funding and has designated a portion of that to supporting Ashburton in its tourism recovery. This focus will be on 4 different areas, and we will brief you all in more detail on that through a formal letter, but also as part of our contract negotiations. But one of our recommendations has been that we believe that Ashburton could enter into a phase that we call destination management planning. The destination management plan that we'd like to co-create with the industry and yourselves will essentially give you a set of unique brand opportunities and challenges to the visitor economy. And we will undertake scoping once we have briefed you further on that and got your approval. That is a value to Ashburton of $50,000 through central government. We've also identified that the Ashburton tourism community has a real need in building its capability in digital and also in domestic marketing. We've designated an additional $30,000 of central government funding to undertake further activities like packaging and product development through capability building for digital and domestic markets. We also have identified that there are very few large-scale tourism operators in the district, and we recognise and understand that a continued focus on Mount Hart isn't sustainable long-term, so we need to make sure that we're supporting Ashburton in developing other commercial products for tourists. We've designated an additional $40,000 of central government funding to product development. That's to support tourism operators who are undertaking research and feasibility or business development and to support them invest in their business. And then finally, we are committed to supporting the recovery. Over the last 2 years, Ashburton has had a 13% reduction in visitor spend. It's not devastating, but it's still significant. And so we have tagged an additional $100,000 over and above Ashburton District Council's investment to domestic marketing. So the total value of the package from the $1.5 million support package is $230,000 for Ashburton. We will formalise that through our process, but as it's publicly discoverable right now, we're happy to have that in a public session and to inform you all as we negotiate with central government that it is our intention to essentially double your investment in the tourism economy over the next year. So nice to have some good news, I hope. We're very happy to enter into conversations. We've been working very closely with your executive and management on what this looks like. But we think it's the start of a framework for a really long-term sustainable tourism economy in Ashburton that's not so heavily reliant on 1 or 2 specific products and so heavily reliant on particular seasons. So that's really us. We'll brief you, Simon and I will brief you further, I believe, as we move forwards into our final contract negotiation. I have that for you in a letter formally as well, which is addressed to yourself, Hamish. So we'll get that off to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for the update. I see there's a couple of questions, lights on for questions. I do have a couple, and one is, you probably heard on the media about our slogan.
I did.
Great. So we're moving forward with that, and you're talking about rebranding. Perhaps those two could merge somehow.
That feels like a lovely segue into some of the conversations we've been having. Look, I can't even remember what your slogan is. I'm sorry, but
Whatever it takes.
We're trying to get rid of it. I've been told it a few times. I'll do whatever it takes to forget it. Look, we couldn't agree more. But for destination management and development, it's actually about DNA. It's about the fundamental framework and forming a really good platform for that. We're certainly not going to enter into creating a slogan. We want to create meaningful experiences on the ground that we're able to tell stories about, and that is a holistic approach to creating storytelling and marketing. A little bit different, but
We could talk about that.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd just like to raise is we're short of staff in this district. We need businesses need staff.
Yeah.
You're targeting Aussie, they target us.
I know.
Flogging ours. Let's do it in reverse with the campaign to get them over here to come for a holiday and stay and work.
Look, I couldn't agree more. It's a massive regional problem, particularly in Canterbury. Mackenzie is suffering significantly as well. Christchurch, we can't recruit fast enough and find people. So we are looking at a region-wide hiring campaign related to Explore CHC. That's probably more within the economic development remit, but we need to work closely on that. So absolutely agree.
Kill two birds, one stone, so to speak. Great. Got questions now, Liz?
Thank you. And my question's kind of changed. So the $230,000, did we get another $230,000 for the event funding?
You did,
Is that correct?
yes.
So,
it's
so
about,
that's
you
on
got
top of that.
245,000.
45,
Yeah.
that's great, thank
Yeah.
you. And just wondering, did you get sponsorship from Head Skis for that ad?
I asked the same question actually. No, nobody's
No,
given me
they
a
were
straight answer.
They were provided by Mount Up. We wanted to get non-branded gear, but it was near impossible to get what we needed. We literally had 8 pairs of absolutely everything you can possibly think of ski-wise within the production, so it was just a mammoth job. My car was full tip to toe full of ski gear, so yeah, it was pretty mega.
And just another question, and we've recently had a boil water notice in Methven, and I know it's hit a lot of the businesses quite hard. Did you see any effect come through from that? We heard that there were a couple of people, a few places had cancellations because of that. Were you aware of that?
I heard of one only, that there was a cancellation, but there may have been more.
So there'd probably be more cancellations because of the Australian.
Yes, definitely the Australian market would have had more impact than the boil notice.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Great news about the extra $230,000 investment. Great news. I just had a sort of a operational query, if you like. I looked at the Mid Canterbury top eats. How are they selected? Do people put their name forward to go on that, or how do you choose those top eats?
Actually, it's done through a review, and a lot of the content that we grab is like Google reviews, Facebook reviews, all of those types of things.
I just didn't see many from Ashburton.
Yeah. No, there's a couple are from Ashburton, it's Cleavers. There's Formosa. And there's a couple more as well, I think, from memory.
Part of the digital capability program is actually teaching businesses that reviews are really important to their search engine optimization.
So you got those from reviews. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So the important thing to that is that people do need to get more reviews on their pages, so that's what we need to
and good
educate
education
them.
for us that we need to do more reviewing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. So looks like the end of the questions. Carolyn, push your button. Again. Thanks very much for coming down and sharing that with us. It's well done. Thank you. You look forward to the next wee while going forward and what we can do with branding, etc. We're going to break in about 5 minutes for a cup of tea. More than welcome to stay and have a chat with us. But before we go to there, we're going to go to Jim, who's got a long-serving and new staff. Jim. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today we have a number of new starters and service milestones to acknowledge. I'll start with the new starters and would ask that as I read out the name of that person, could they please stand up so that everyone knows who you are. So first of all we have Hayley Lamb. Hayley's one of our new GIS graduates. She's working in Gordon's team, has moved to Ashburton from Christchurch and a recent graduate. We have a second GIS graduate, and that's Margot Tussier. She's also working in Gordon's team, originally from Switzerland, visited New Zealand and fell in love with the place. She's joined us from Auckland, where she also completed her study recently. We also have Daniel Leggett. He's our new swim school manager. He's working for Kate down at EANC. He came to us from Wellington, where incidentally he worked for Kate previously. He was running a council-run rec and fitness centre in Wellington. We'll move on to the service recognitions. Today we have 3 people with long service to recognise, and I'd ask that when I read out your name, if you can move up to receive your acknowledgement and gift. Our first service recognition is for Colin Windleborn. Colin leads our commercial property team and has passed his 5-year service milestone in May this year. At around the same time, he was heavily involved in the civil defence response to the May flooding event as a logistics manager. Colin joined ADC from Australia, where he was working as the property manager for the Warringah Council in New South Wales. Colin possesses a wealth of knowledge in the local government sphere of property management, but can be relied upon to provide sound and well thought out advice on anything that falls under his portfolio, and has been involved in a number of challenging buildings and property agreements on behalf of Council. Thank you, Colin, for your efforts, and congratulations on your 5-year anniversary. Our second service recognition today is Andrea McMurray. And today we celebrate 15 years of service milestone for Andrea, who works within our environmental monitoring team as the Systems Officer Animal Control. Andrea first applied for a role with Council as an administration assistant, having a number of years' experience in similar positions in both the private and public sector. After 6 years working within customer services, her passion for animals saw her apply for and successfully attain her current role. Andrea is a hard-working and enthusiastic and loves to talk to anyone about her animals and her 3 boys. Andrea also recently adopted a rescue dog by the name of Simon and enjoys taking him for runs, which is another of her passions. So on behalf of Council, the community and all of our 4-legged friends, thank you for the past 15 years. Our final service milestone for the day is Rhonda Gallagher. And today we celebrate a significant milestone for Rhonda, who is a stalwart of our open spaces and the supervisor of a dedicated team that is a credit to her hard work and leadership. Rhonda joined the Council in June 2001, making it her 20-year milestone today as the Parks team leader. At the depot, after 8 seasons working at both the Elgin Nursery and the Phaeton Freezing Works season about. Rhonda is incredibly reliable, hardworking and extremely loyal, and can be relied upon to bring a smile and a chat with her anywhere she goes within the district. Rhonda looks after the turf, trees and training areas within the open spaces, but there is also a 4th T, being the toilets. Rhonda's team look after a number of the rural toilets within the district, and many of the favourable comments ADC receive are based on the hard work and dedication that Rhonda and her team put into these facilities in very trying circumstances at times. So Rhonda, on behalf of all of council, ratepayers alike, thank you for the past 20 years, and we hope that your dedication and high standards continue in your role for quite a few more years to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome to the new staff. I hope you'll fit in and enjoy your time here, and also congratulations to our long-serving staff. We're going to break now for a cup of tea, so please join us next door for a cup of tea and have a wee chat and get to know each other a wee bit better. Thanks. 15 minutes. Let's wait for the red light to go on. There we are. We'll reconvene after the. We're just reconvening after the afternoon tea break, councillors, and Councillor Mackay.
Mr Mayor, I move that Council receives the Mayor's report and any supplementary information he was willing to offer.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay, and the seconder, Councillor Cameron.
Mayor, what was the motion, please?
That we receive the Mayor's report. And we're going to put the motion that we receive the Mayor's report and discuss
Point of order.
it.
Why
And discuss
can
it
we not
after.
discuss it?
You can discuss it once we've received it.
Righto.
And any supplementary information he wants to give.
What we didn't hear you say.
Right. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Just one alteration to make, and it's talked about. An announcement was made. 1.5 billion. It's 2.5 billion. Which was this week now. It's been described as other things as well. Any thing on the Mayor's report, Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. At the conference in Blenheim, was the Three Waters reform that local government New Zealand signed with the government of the Memorandum of Understanding, was it discussed, or did the mayors and delegates have any input? Did they know it was coming, or was there any knowledge of it?
I don't believe they knew it was coming. They had no input into it unless you're on the executive of local government NZ. Is that the question? There was all two questions. No, apparently it is a non-binding on the. It's an agreement between LGNZ and the government, the Crown, non-binding on individual councils.
I just comment to say that I'm very disappointed with the contents of it. In fact, I was disgusted with the contents of it, and I'm disappointed that local government New Zealand had stooped to pressure like that, especially when the conference was there, that they weren't informed what they were actually doing.
Your points were echoed at the conference. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. So I attended the conference as well, and we'll put in a report, I presume.
For the next council meeting.
next council meeting, on the workshops, etc. And that's all I had to say, I think.
Councillor Lethem.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could we just have a quick update? When are we going to be discussing that Three Waters?
Three Waters. We've got a workshop planned, and Hamish might update us to a timeline.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, through you. So our intention, I'll go back half a step. So part of the heads of agreement between Local Government New Zealand and the Crown is that councils have an 8-week period to consider, digest and provide feedback on the Three Water Reform Package. Our intention is to help council understand more deeply the data, to consider it in the light of the heads of agreement and some of the implications of that heads of agreement, plus the funding package. We have an intention to do that in a couple of ways. One is we have engaged through Local Government New Zealand, so at no cost to council, Morris and Lowe as consultants to try and better understand the assumptions that lead to Ashburton District's dashboard. And we have started that and have a preliminary report from them that we want to discuss with them. And I have invited Alan Pragnell, who is leading the work from DIA, to come to Ashburton. He has inundated with requests, as you can imagine, from 67 councils. And he has said to us that if we are prepared to organise and host a rural Canterbury Council forum, then he will make the effort to come down and sort of tick off a whole lot of councils all at the same time. We have tentatively suggested that will be the 31st of August, but I have only had that confirmed this morning as he's available that day, and we need to put that in place into council diaries. But of course that also is to be for all rural councils in Canterbury, and so there's a whole host of people that have to be available and willing to make that date work before I can confirm it. But so our intention is to have a workshop with you, with Mr McCann and Mr Guthrie, with Morris and Lowe's information and anything else we can bring to bear prior to meeting with Alan. so that you are as well informed as possible when you get to have the discussion with Alan. One of the things that LG&Z and DIA, therefore the Crown, are most concerned about is that that the information upon which council are being asked to comment and make decisions on hasn't been well distributed to individual councillors and is not well understood.
Yeah.
I think in our case we've distributed absolutely everything to you,
Yes.
but a lot of it is dense and impregnable and hard to understand because of the volume of it. So while I don't think we're guilty of not distributing it, I'm not sure that we've done everything yet to help you understand it completely. So I want us to be as well briefed and as coherently knowledgeable as we possibly can be before having that discussion with Alan Pragnell. There is then, at the end of the 8 weeks, the opportunity to provide feedback. We are advised that that period is not intended to involve consultation with the community to get an official position. That's to be clarified by the end of this week. We are looking for some guidelines to come from DIA as to exactly what it is and isn't expected of councils in terms of that feedback. The steering committee that I am on has asked DIA to be brutally honest with what they want, because there are so many swirling rumours about what councils are being asked to do. Some councils are saying they need to have a full consultation with their community before they can provide feedback. That's not DIA's intention. They just want feedback on the material itself. How are we feeling about the reform? Some councils want to get the community's perspective before they give that feedback. Some councils are happy to provide more detailed sort of technical feedback and then maybe consult the community after that. It's a little bit confusing, but the guidelines which are due to be issued by the end of this week will be really helpful as to what it is that the Crown is expecting from us at the end of that 8 week period.
So as a councillor here, sometime in the next month we will be having a look at it. Is that?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that in prior to the 31st of August, so within the next 4.5 weeks, we will be having a workshop with the Ashburton District Councillors to try and drill into the information so that you've got understanding, and then any questions we have of the DIA are not around. I don't know why that figures that. It's much more fundamental about the reforms and the rationale or concerns you might have, rather than asking technical questions that we could have answered ourselves if we'd thought of them first. Yeah.
Caroline?
Just going back to Councillor Wilson's remarks on the local government, New Zealand Local Government Association signing the heads of agreement, and I note one of the in the background on the first page it says local government NZ is an incorporated society that represents the national interests of local government in New Zealand and leads best practice. They've signed on our behalf on the 13th of July without talking to us or consulting with us as their representative. Can we not send them a letter to say we find this unacceptable and this should not occur and they've let us down, or when we're not going to be party? I mean, I understand we don't have to concur, but they've essentially signed as our representatives in everything but.
The mayors were not, some mayors, and I've seen the correspondence for them, were certainly not happy. Some were happy, and some were not, and they, in their emails, didn't hold back on their responses.
No, but should something more formal not be sent?
I don't see it as signing on my behalf or our behalf.
No.
They signed it on their behalf. It's a memorandum of understanding, so it holds no weight, I wouldn't think.
Well, we hope it holds weight in terms of
an understanding.
The sector's commitment to work with the Crown on this and future reforms, because it does signal quite a different way of working. Normally the Crown would announce reforms, the RMA for example, and maybe work with us on the detail, but not work with us on the fundamental structure of something. And this signalled quite a different way of approaching reform, which has a variety of different views in the local government sector. And local government in New Zealand, if they were to try and represent, if they consulted and represented on matters like this, would be paralysed. because they simply cannot represent the disparate views of their members because they're so widely different. So Local Government New Zealand have been at pains to point out, and I think we've sent you the explanation as to why they took a leadership position on this particular matter. And if this council doesn't agree that was the right thing to do, you pass a resolution and we'll send whatever message you want to Local Government New Zealand. But they have tried to explain why they took the position they did. They cannot represent all the views. That is impossible in this case.
And I forwarded that response back from Local Government New Zealand to you.
Yes, you did. They cannot represent all the views, but that's a little bit like council long-term planning. They have to endeavour to navigate the path between trying to represent them as best they can, or acknowledging that and not. Who are they if they're not a group of Local Government New Zealand members? Who are Local Government New Zealand? They're a group of local government people. They're a group of us. So they've chosen to make a decision based on.
Who we've elected to take the executive role.
Did we elect? That's right.
You didn't, but we did.
I think it would be akin to expecting Federated Farmers to poll their members every time they put out a press release. Look, there'll be disparate views, and in the end, you have to be accountable for how you behave, and that's fair. But there are times when membership organisations take a stance on something that some think's right and some think isn't.
We just have to put our big boy pants on and make the decision.
We do.
That's right. But we are certainly open to express anything you like back to them by the stance they took.
If there's not a will round the table, then of course not. You know.
But there may be.
Yeah, I don't see any future and or
no
anything to gain from it.
Yeah. That's fair.
But the point has been made by other mayors back to Stuart.
Mr. Mayor, I've got two questions.
Caroline?
I beg your pardon.
Two questions. The first one, to let us expect us to make a decision when we've got half the information. We don't know how it's going to be charged when the organisation is confirmed. Is it we're all going to pay the same per litre? How do we apply for water? How do they, infrastructure, how do they allocate it? There's that much stuff there. They've glossed over the top, and we've got, on the ground, we've got no idea. People can see the 180 million, and they seem to think it's going to be plucked out of government funds. All ratepayers are going to pay that. Well, that's got to be pointed out. The other question, I asked Hamish, I want the figures that we put in on our behalf to the organisation. I want the raw figures. I don't want them spun by a workshop. I want the figures so that we know exactly what we said and why we've come out so bad on those figures.
Yep. And we've got that underway. It's a massively complicated 67 page, 13,000 page, whatever it is, spreadsheet, and we're very happy to send it to you. But it's not a easy matter. It's not a 2 pages document to give you. It is extraordinarily complicated. It took our entire assets team 4 months to complete. So, but it's not a secret. You're very welcome to it. And we're in the process of putting it in some sort of form where it is emailable for councillors to explore as much as they like. It isn't a secret.
Angus?
Mr. Mayor, question to you only. Are we debating this now, or
No,
should I leave all my personal points?
Leave it to the workshop. Leave it to the workshop where we can discuss it then. We're just in the mayor's report. But the points are well made about the level, the memorandum of understanding. So that takes us to the end of the open part of meeting. I'll move that we move into committee. Seconded, Councillor McMillan. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Sean, you just need to leave us, but Dan, you're welcome to stay.